Underway right now. A stunning cheating scandal involving famous actresses, coaches, and administrators at major elite universities, all accused of paying and accepting millions of dollars in bribes to get kids into college. Another week, another internal battle in the Democratic Party. Today's debate, is impeaching Trump worth it? Plus, if Joe Biden's running for president, his speech today may have been his unofficial kickoff. See what happened. And as more and more countries ground the Boeing jets involved in deadly crashes, why isn't the U.S. and what can passengers do? We begin with breaking news. Wealthy individuals accused of using their money to buy their kids' way into college. Federal authorities say they have charged 50 people in the largest college admission scam ever prosecuted by the Justice Department. And those facing charges include coaches, college exam administrators, as well as CEOs and celebrities. Academy Award nominee Felicity Huffman and Full House actress Lori Loughlin are both charged in what prosecutors describe as an elaborate scam.
A central defendant in the scheme, William Singer, will plead guilty today to charges of racketeering conspiracy, money laundering conspiracy, conspiracy to defraud the United States, and obstruction of justice. Singer allegedly ran a college counseling service and something called the Key Worldwide Foundation. Between roughly 2011 and 2018, wealthy parents paid Singer about $25 million in total to guarantee their children's admission to elite schools, including Yale, Georgetown, Stanford, the University of Southern California, the University of Texas, UCLA, and Wake Forest.
Now, those arrested include 2 administrators of the SAT and the ACT tests, 1 exam proctor, 9 coaches at elite schools, 1 college administrator, and 33 parents. National correspondent Bryn Gingras is in Boston, where prosecutors made this announcement. We have former MIT admissions counselor McGregor Crowley, who is also with us, along with business law attorney Seth Berensweig. Bryn, first, just walk us through how this elaborate scheme worked.
Yes, elaborate and enormous, Brianna. I mean, you just described it right there as far as how big this was. Investigators were looking into this for the last year. They called it Operation Varsity Blues. And the mastermind, they say, behind it was a man named Rick Singer, and he is expected to be in court and plead guilty, according to authorities, within the next few hours or so. What the DOJ says, Singer set up 2 plans, basically to help these parents get their children into elite universities. One way they could do that, according to these court documents, was basically parents would have Singer have someone take tests for them, the ACTs, the SATs, and actually physically take those tests in order to obtain a better score. Another case, he would have someone who would change the scores in order to bring up their SAT scores or ACT scores for admission tests into these college universities. On a separate way that parents would basically hire a Singer was to go through the athletic route. Basically, according to authorities, Singer would bribe athletic officials, coaches, give them money, and they would basically admit a student into their school as an athlete, even if that person never played a sport. Just incredible details coming out of this news conference that wrapped up about an hour ago. Now, you named 2 famous actresses, Felicity Huffman and Lori Loughlin. They basically, each of them allegedly took these separate routes with their daughters. Felicity Huffman allegedly paying $15,000 to get one daughter's test scores changed in order to get a better SAT score. As far as Lori Loughlin is concerned with these court paperwork, she asked Rick Singer to basically get her daughter admitted to USC by posing as a crew student, athlete rather, even though she never played crew. So again, just a lot of detail, but we're not just talking about actresses. As you said, there are CEOs, there are a lot of famous people on this list, and a lot of them have been arrested so far. Others waiting to turn themselves in. Authorities say this isn't the end of it. The investigation is actually still ongoing, Brianna.
Yeah, and we'll see how many. That's also the question here. So Seth, tell us about the charges here.
So this is really essentially a 2-stage criminal complaint. In the first stage, Mr. Singer was offering a two-path scheme where he could get your kid in with a criminal conspiracy either through rigging the game with your ACT or SAT scores, or he also had connections with elite schools with coaches and assistant coaches where you could create a sham to get someone into a sporting avenue into the school through fraud, and they would literally Photoshop pictures over other athletes' bodies. It was just very bold and outrageous. And not only was that not the complete fraud, but also at a second level, they laundered the money through a sham enterprise, a nonprofit organization. So it wasn't enough for these defendants to allegedly commit academic fraud to bounce out qualified kids, but then they looked to take a tax deduction for a charitable deduction at the end of the day as well.
So that's tax fraud, right?
It's tax fraud.
Racketeering, money laundering,
RICO.
Obstruction.
You got it. So I think you're pointing to another key point here. This is a huge day, but this is just the beginning. This is a criminal complaint. It's not an indictment like what we're used to seeing, like with Manafort and so forth. What that means is that these individuals have the right to appear before a judge. They're under arrest. They're going to go in front of a judge, and either they're going to not waive indictment, which means they're going to be peltered with all these kinds of high-level felonies in a much broader case, or they're going to plead it out. On the charges that they're facing right now, they're already facing 20 years. So you're going to see a lot of people fall like flies, I predict.
McGregor, you are an expert in college admissions. You were a admissions counselor at MIT, one of the country's most elite universities. Had you heard of something like this? And if so, did you ever have a sense of how widespread this problem is?
I've never heard anything like this ever happen. I mean, it's really a travesty. I think for me, the biggest travesty here is that a number of, it sounds as though from the indictment, a number of the children involved here, and that's in and of itself is awful, but received fake diagnoses of learning disabilities, dyslexia, attentional issues. And as a pediatrician and an admissions officer, I think that's just does an awful disservice to kids who actually have those disabilities and who need the extended time and the accommodations in order to show their potential on these standardized tests.
I get a sense of how heavy this subject is to you as you are seeing something that you never even knew existed. What do you think about the students who have worked hard, do not get in, and they hear about this?
I think it just underscores how overall unfair the process is. Many admissions officers hope to embrace a really meritocratic process of selection where they admit the best students to that college or that university. But in reality, there's just a significant amount of forces and that students just don't know about that take place, that go into effect in the selection process that really doesn't make it as meritocratic as they hope it would be.
So I wonder, because we know, McGregor, there's certainly this perception that there are people who will donate, right, to universities, or maybe they're an alum, and they're doing that to try to curry favor for their child. How real is that? And isn't that already an opportunity to take advantage of the system? And how do you see that different from this?
I think it's an excellent question. I think one of the processes that many people don't know about is that many universities have a development office that deals directly with families, donors, alumni, and then there's the admissions office. And there's some pretty substantial barriers that exist between the two, so that decisions don't take into account, whether a family can donate or has donated. But you see the name on a building, you see the name on the application, and sometimes it's sort of an implicit decision that takes place. But I think there are ways to do this, and there are ways to not do this, and this to me is just it's just exceptionally unethical, and I think it's going to end up being larger. It sounds like it's going to be larger than what was discussed today, and I think it's going to do a lot of harm to schools, to admissions offices, because now they're going to have the onus is on them to show that this is a fair process, or as fair as it can possibly be.
All right, McGregor, Crowley, thank you so much. Seth Berensweig as well, thank you for your legal expertise. Freshman Democrats supporting the impeachment of President Trump are now responding to their party leader, Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who's saying that President Trump is not worth it. Plus, former Vice President Dick Cheney giving the clearest indicator, or Joe Biden, pardon me. Lots of former vice presidents we're talking about today. Anyways, Biden giving the clearest indication yet that he may join the 2020 race. See what happened with the crowd at his speech. And the calls are growing louder for Boeing to ground the jets involved in 2 deadly crashes. What do you do if you're about to fly on one?
More. Call 1-800-831-3700.
There has been plenty of reaction on Capitol Hill today to House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who says she's not ready to support a push for impeachment. In a recent interview, Pelosi said that right now it's not worth the division or the chaos that it would create. But did she leave the door open to the idea in the future, saying that if this equation changes, she says there's something so compelling and overwhelming and bipartisan. Now, Democrats say that's why they're continuing the oversight process with several investigations in play. And here's some of the reaction today to Pelosi's comments.
I agree that we have to proceed with caution, and that is the position of the overwhelming majority of the members of the House Democratic Caucus.
When public opinion is in support of removal, I'm confident that the impeachment will go forward.
I think the Speaker is absolutely right that if the evidence isn't sufficient to win bipartisan support for this, putting the country through a failed impeachment is not a good idea.
Do you agree with that, not pursuing impeachment?
At this time, yeah. And we don't have the Mueller report yet. I think you got to wait to see what's in that report.
Safe to say that if the Speaker has indicated that she doesn't favor that course of action, that it's not going to happen.
So clearly we're trying to see what Democrats think, and we have Senator Maggie Hassan, a Democrat who represents New Hampshire, joining us today. You sit on the Senate Homeland Security Committee, and we really appreciate you being with us. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Brianna.
Do you agree with Speaker Pelosi that impeachment is not worth it for Democrats?
Look, I have long said that President Trump's rhetoric and actions render him unfit to be our president. That being said, I think we really need to see the special counsel be allowed to complete his investigation, issue his report, see what it says, and review that report with the understanding that the decision to go forward with impeachment is a really significant and grave one, and it's not something we should do lightly.
There is a scenario where it is possible to imagine that the Mueller report does raise some issue of major crimes committed, but perhaps Republicans decide that they are going to stand by the president. Mm-hmm. I wonder if you think, in that case, is there a duty on the part of Democrats to pursue impeachment if the president has committed significant crimes, even if it may be a political disaster for your party?
Again, I think it's really important just to see what the special counsel finds and proceed from there. But I do think it's really important that we always evaluate whether to go forward with the overall impact that decision would have on our country.
And what do you mean, the overall impact meaning?
Well, how divisive it would be. And certainly, we are going to have to see whether if the Mueller report really substantiates criminal behavior or impeachable behavior, what the reaction of our Republican colleagues are. I understand the concern people bring about protecting the Constitution, but I also think we have an obligation to work together as Americans to move our country forward. And that's one of the things that you have to balance in this overall discussion.
So you're being from New Hampshire, you know you can't really throw a rock there without hitting a presidential candidate. And former Vice President Joe Biden teased his future in that regard a bit this morning. He told a cheering crowd here in Washington that they were rather energetic, and he said he may need their energy in a few weeks. Would you support a Biden candidacy?
Oh, look, I think Vice President Biden has a great case to make to the American people. And I think we also have a really robust and excellent group of candidates in the field right now. My job in New Hampshire is to make sure we have the welcome mat there and make sure that we are vetting all of these candidates. What I know about the vice president and what I know about our candidates is they're going to fight for working families and make sure we have an economy that works for everyone. And that's really what this election cycle is going to be about.
So despite, and I want to talk to you now about the president's budget, because despite his promises to protect Medicare, his budget would cut billions of dollars from the program, $845 billion from the program. And it also makes deep cuts in Medicaid. It cuts Social Security. You're on the Senate Finance Committee. The dollar amount, surely this is a wish list. It's not going to stay the same when all of this is said and done. But just what's your reaction to the president as he does make his priorities clear here, proposing any cuts to Medicare?
Well, look, this is something the president said he would never do when he was running for office. He said he wouldn't cut Medicare. He said he wouldn't cut Social Security. And his budget proposes significant cuts to both. There are a couple of things in this budget that I appreciate. One is that he has kept level critical funding for substance misuse, anti-opioid epidemic grants. That's good. There's some increased funding for cybersecurity. That's good. But overall, this is a really fiscally irresponsible budget that will take us backwards. In addition to those cuts to Medicare that you talked about and Social Security, deep cuts to Medicaid and the ending of Medicaid expansion, which is one of the critical tools that people on the front lines of the opioid epidemic have at their disposal, and tell me how that is critically important to them all the time. So on the one hand, the president is maintaining some opioid funding, but when it gets to the healthcare system that can really help us in that regard, this budget takes us very far backwards. It also would allow, again, insurance companies to discriminate against people with pre-existing conditions. So again, leaving more Americans uninsured, adding to all of the costs that come with that. So at the end of the day, this is a really irresponsible budget in which the president is also breaking promises he made to the American people. What we know we need to do is build a stronger, more effective healthcare system that brings the cost of healthcare down, but make sure that we're expanding coverage to everybody.
The budget does keep a key promise, which I know really matters in your state, and that is money to combat the opioid epidemic. You mentioned it there. I mean, that is something among a few other of the proposals in here that you look at and say you can get behind, right?
I can get behind that, but if you go ahead and keep the money to fight opioids, it's specifically targeted for opioids, and undo and you end Medicaid expansion, you're undermining the whole effort because Medicaid expansion covers substance use disorder treatment. And so it's absolutely critical. You take that away and you're going to have more people again who can't access treatment. So the two things are contradictory. I can support and appreciate the targeted opioid money staying the same, although obviously we could use more, but it really isn't going to be very effective if they end Medicaid expansion and cut and cap traditional Medicaid. So overall, this is a very backward budget, and it's going to undermine critical healthcare services for millions of Americans.
I want to ask you about something the Washington Post is reporting some details from a Republican retreat this past weekend where the former Vice President Dick Cheney took the current VP to task for the administration's foreign policy. Cheney told Vice President Pence that allies were losing confidence in the United States. And he also said that the Trump foreign policy aligns closer to Barack Obama than Ronald Reagan. What is your reaction to that?
Well, we have never seen a more damaging foreign policy than what we are seeing with Donald Trump. He is cozying up to our adversaries
will you
like
give,
Putin and
from
Kim
your
Jong-un.
perspective, do you agree with Dick Cheney? And do you agree with Dick Cheney?
Well, what I agree with is comments that say that Donald Trump's foreign policy is very dangerous. It's rash, it's impulsive. He puts the word of foreign adversaries like Putin ahead of the word of our own intelligence professionals. He decides, without consulting the military or intelligence, to suddenly pull out of Syria, and has no strategy or discipline when it comes to foreign policy. That is very harmful and very dangerous.
All right, Senator Maggie Hassan, thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me on.
The list is growing longer and longer. More countries banning a type of Boeing plane involved in 2 deadly crashes as pressure mounts on the United States to make a move and ground planes.
A new CNN original series, Sunday night at 9.
The calls to ground all Boeing MAX 8 planes is growing ever louder. More than 10 countries, including the United Kingdom, have now either grounded the planes or banned them from their airspace following the Ethiopian Airlines crash that killed all 157 people on board. The CEO of Ethiopian Airlines said the pilots radioed that they were having flight control problems before the plane went down. Here in the U.S., Senators Elizabeth Warren and Mitt Romney, could you find two people more apart? Are some of the lawmakers who have called on the FAA to order the planes parked. The FAA says it has, quote, full confidence in the plane, while the two airlines that fly the MAX 8, Southwest and American, say they have not seen any evidence that would make them think the planes are not safe to fly. President Trump also weighing in a short time ago, saying, in part, airplanes are becoming far too complex to fly. Pilots are no longer needed. The complexity creates danger. All of this for great cost, yet very little gain. I don't know about you, but I don't want Albert Einstein to be my pilot. I want great flying professionals that are allowed to easily and quickly take control of a plane. Just 2 weeks ago in Vietnam, the president trumpeted the sale of 100 Boeing MAX 8 planes, MAX planes to a Vietnamese carrier. Dennis Tager is with me now. He is a 737 pilot for American Airlines, and he is the spokesman for the Allied Pilots Association. The Flight Attendants Association says that it wants the FAA to step in. Dennis, should these planes, as the Flight Attendants Association says, should they be grounded right now?
Well, we certainly respect the concern, and thank you to the President for reaffirming the importance of having pilots in the cockpit who are highly trained and experienced. Certainly we're concerned. The difference here at American is after the Lion Air crash, we did have meetings with Boeing, and we expressed our pilots' concerns over this. Boeing then finally disclosed to us a system that led to the nose down that everyone has focused on in a Lion Air crash. And that system, we asked for software changes. Those changes were just announced by the FAA yesterday, along with additional training. What's unique at American Airlines, and Boeing reaffirmed this for us, is that we have indicators in the cockpit, unlike any other carrier in the U.S. that I'm aware of. We've had them for over 20 years, and they're AOA indicators. And with that comes warnings of that erroneous system.
It's an angle indicator, right?
Thank you. Angle of attack indicator. And we have, that's unique to American, and we have that in our aircraft, and that gives us an alert prior to this. Now, this is not to connect it to the Ethiopian crash. We're waiting for the details on that, but we deeply, deeply respect and also are equally concerned about the information coming out of that. But it's too early to make decisive decisions, and we're confident that those aircraft are safe for the systems that we are aware of.
Okay, so you're basically saying that you have this angle of attack indicator, and because of that, you think at this point it would compensate for any problems with the plane, and you're not calling for the planes to be grounded, just to be clear, although you say you respect that people are calling for that. A lot of them are. A lot of influential people, too. I want to talk about Boeing, because it was after the Lion Air crash in the fall, where they put out more information in a really unprecedented move, information that pilots like yourself didn't previously have about this plane that clearly they should have had. Is Boeing doing all that it should here? Have they fulfilled their responsibilities?
Since the Lion Air break of trust, they have. And I want to point out that not only indicators, but the pilots have identified the process and the procedures to stop that malady in the aircraft and stop the whole process from happening. So President Trump is right. The pilots being aware of this, and others have talked about this information stream to us, that's happened after the Lion Air crash. And Boeing has now updated that with the FAA's condoning of additional training and software update. Again, we don't know what happened with the Ethiopian crash, and we are certainly reserving judgment based on that information. Pilots work on facts, and we're human beings. We're asking those questions. We're just as concerned, and we'll see what happens as we go forward. Every minute counts on this. That information is key.
Can I just ask you a question, though, about the president's tweet? Has automation helped with safety? I mean, he is expressing concerns, and you are appreciative that he's saying there should be experienced pilots. But has automation and some of these computers, have they helped keep planes safer? Because we haven't seen a lot of mechanical failures, really.
Absolutely. Automation is an enhancement to the margin of safety. It is not the replacement for experienced pilots. Period. Okay. The president's observation is just like our pilot's observation. I want that technology. It helps me out. It's part of my equipment and my crew, essentially. But when that goes afoul, then I need to use stick and rudder skills and bring that aircraft back and protect those people. That's why we're there.
All right, Dennis Tajer, thank you so much. We really appreciate your expertise. We have more now on stunning breaking news. Actresses Felicity Huffman and Lori Loughlin are among dozens of parents charged in a massive cheating scam involving college entrances. Plus, a new book giving us a behind-the-scenes look at Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner's rise to power inside of the White House. We have the new details on reports that President Trump wanted them out.
Liberty Music
says she is not in favor of pursuing the impeachment of President Trump right now. She says that it's not worth it for Democrats. Some people echoing that, saying it would be too divisive. She also said that President Trump is intellectually and ethically unfit for office. And I want to talk about this with A.B. Stoddard, associate editor for Real Clear Politics, and CNN chief political analyst Gloria Borger. What do you make of Pelosi's rationale and the fact that it's creating a bit of a division here?
Well, it is, because there are progressive Democrats who say, wait a minute, she shouldn't be doing this and ruling that out. And I think Nancy Pelosi, first of all, did it before the Mueller report came out, which is very important in the timing because it made it clear she wasn't reacting to anything that was in the Mueller report. And she's also saying, you know, let's just slow down here. She looks at the polls. A majority of Americans, even though a lot of them believe that the president has done something wrong, they don't favor impeachment. They're sick of it. They're exhausted by it. She doesn't want this to get in the middle of an agenda that the Democrats might have. So she says, hold off. He's just not worth it.
What do you think?
I agree with Gloria. I think you're looking at a woman who wants to hold the House in 2020 and wants her party to win the presidency. Right. And it's true. The founders intended for a remedy that would look like this. And if it's never used, it's never going to be used. And how do you turn someone out of office? But you're looking back at the Clinton example. You're looking at a Republican Party over on the Senate side that's not going to convict him, and therefore it would be a wasted effort on the House side. Could end up being a political boon to the president. So it becomes purely a political issue now. It's no longer a legal constitutional issue. She's saying politically it's not worth it, and she knows her party's in a better position to run against a weakened President Trump on the other side without dividing the country in this explosive way. I think she's right, and I think that Gloria's right that it was very smart to come out now, and there's no findings. The Republicans will be in a terrible pinch if the findings are bad.
Listen to what Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, who made headlines for saying the president in very coarse language should be impeached. This is what she told Armani Raju.
I can tell you again, Speaker Pelosi and all members of leadership have always encouraged us to represent our district, and this is something that was very important to my residents, still continue to be in my constituents, and so that I'm going to move forward. Obviously, it's important that there's a transparent process. No one, not even the president, should be above the law.
AB, I mean, that's going to be the feeling of a lot of voters.
That's what Rashida Tlaib is going to tell her constituents back home. Pelosi is freeing her members to say whatever that they want to say, and then they can say, my school principal won't let me.
Yeah, she's taking the hit. She's taking the hit.
Okay.
Yeah, she's taking the hit for her members, and that's probably saying to them, look, you can do what you want to do, and you blame it on me. I'm the bad guy here, and that's okay. Now, all of this, of course, let's see what's in the Mueller report. Let's see what occurred.
Because she didn't fully close the door on impeachment.
No, she did not. She did not. This is sort of a before Mueller. She didn't close the door. She wants to see what is presented, but she kind of said, slow down. I don't want us to be the party of just throwing him out of office and people will think that we want to delegitimize him.
But I just talked to Senator Hassan, AB, who essentially said, if we look at, I said, is there a situation where the crimes are clear, but Republicans don't come to the side of Democrats on this? Basically what happens. And she said that you need to look at how divisive this is going to be. So it seemed like she was saying it's not as much about what the evidence bears out, but about what the effect of impeachment will be. Is that the correct stance?
Absolutely. That's what Pelosi's saying, that there are already legal opinions that it's evident he's